So I'll start with Swapnil. Why don't you give a little bit of your background, and then as a extra bonus, why don't you talk a little bit about Rapid7's pricing and packaging sort of model, a summary, if you will.
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. Good morning, everyone. Swapnil. I'm the Director for Commercialization and Market Dev over at Rapid7. For people who don't know who Rapid7 is, we are a global cybersecurity leader with multiple products in vulnerability management, detection and response, and also in AppSec. I've been doing pricing and packaging for over 15 years with both B2C and B2B companies. And to touch upon the pricing model, from a Rapid7 perspective, we have a very simple pricing model, and that's been our differentiator and something that's really helped us win huge market share is simple asset-based pricing, something that's very predictable, and customers can know like what they're buying and what their cost is going to be next year as well. I'll stop there.
Patrick, why don't you give an intro and kind of give a background on ProfitWell?
Yeah, definitely. So Patrick Campbell, CEO founder of ProfitWell. ProfitWell, we exist to drive subscription revenue automatically. And the way we do that is we have a free subscription financial metrics product that you plug into your billing system, and then for free get all of your financial reporting in real time and absolutely accurate way. We have about 25% of the entire subscription market using that product, and so a lot of experience with freemium. I was very anti-freemium early in my pricing journey, and now I'm a big freemium zealot, which is really funny. And then the way that we make money is we have a couple of different products that drive subscription revenue. One of which is helps out with retention. It's called Retain. It automatically helps your churn and reduces your churn and increases your retention. And the pricing model on that product is it's called a pure value metric. So it's purely paid for performance. And then we have a product called Price Intelligently, which does pricing and helps with pricing. It's a mix of a software and a service. And so that model is value based, but also has an element of like, we need to make sure we also protect our costs. And so there's some interesting dynamics we can get into because it's a little bit more of a cost heavy product. But yeah, happy to be here. I think my expertise in pricing lies around value metrics, value-based pricing, and then freemium is kind of where I can answer a lot of questions in addition to any subscription benchmarks, B2B, D2C that you would be looking for. We've seen it or we have it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks, Patrick. Thomas, not sure if you can hear us, but we can hear you and we can see you. So I'm just going to ask you to give a background and talk about Twilio. And your pricing model. If not, I'm just going to call you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. All right, so this is very straight, but I'll give you my quick intro here. So I'm Thomas Jensen. I'm in San Francisco here, where it's 7:20 in the morning. I lead product pricing at Twilio, which is a gig I just took on a few months ago. Prior to that, I was at Workday building up the pricing function there, and I think all in all, I have 15 years of doing pricing and licensing for software. Twilio is at its core a developer platform and a set of APIs to essentially manage the telecom layer in a customer engagement strategy or anything you can imagine like that. Our pricing model is a very much a usage-based and a pay-as-you-go model, and that's true both for self-service customers as well as for big enterprises that we sell to. This is a complete pivot for me, as Workday's model is the exact opposite, which is very high value, very fixed multi-year contracts. So I've kind of seen the whole continuum there, and it's pretty interesting. One of the things I love to do the most about my job is to talk to founders and advise startups on just how to get deliberate about pricing. I find that really exciting and inspiring, and so that's I've been looking forward to this, and that's why I got up early, and I really hope that this audio issue fixes itself. But nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Thomas. Hopefully we can get your audio working. We're going to call you on the side, and hopefully you can hear us. So yesterday when we were talking in the as we were planning the session, Thomas said that the one piece of advice he would give to any founder early stage company as a hack would be to raise prices. That's the one thing that they could do to sort of have an impact. I don't know, Swapnil, do you want to kind of speak to that, and then if we can get Thomas involved, we will. And Patrick, you're more than welcome to answer that question as well.
Sure, thanks, Jimmy. So it is a fair question, and this is something that we grapple with all the time. There is this interesting dynamic where there are certain fractions in the company that want to increase prices, where there are certain companies that don't. Anytime there is a price change that is recommended, particularly going up, there is a little bit of friction with the sales team, and something that they are not always in favor of. However, in our recent experience, we have seen that the sales team has been asking about that as well. But I would 100% agree that if there is a ton of value that you are providing and you made a lot of improvements in the product since the last time you changed prices, we should absolutely go ahead and ask customers for what value your product is delivering. And one easy way to do that is, how is the product helping them make more money or helping them save more money? That just becomes a very good leeway point or a talking point. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth kind of noting, if taking a step back, pricing's at the intersection of kind of uncomfortable and important, right? And whenever you have something like that, people tend to have this analysis paralysis. So what we've noticed, and this is exactly what Swapnil's getting at, is that a lot of companies, especially in the earlier stages, but even up to, we've seen it with companies up to 100 million and even getting over 100 million in revenue, they never touch their pricing. And so when Thomas is saying like, hey, one of the biggest things is raise prices, it's, very true, because there's just so many companies out there that have never touched it, and they're scared of it. And, they're scared they're going to lose all their customers because if they change their price by 15%. In actuality, at least what we've seen time and time again with different companies we work with, is that, yeah, you're going to lose some customers, but you even lose customers if you lower prices. It's just one of those things where it's very similar to just reminding a certain part of your customer base that they're paying for something. And so what we kind of see, which is really cool, is that after you'll raise prices or even lower them, you will see a little bit of an uptick in churn, but your churn will actually stabilize, much lower than it was originally, because you're kind of getting rid of those customers who just weren't ready for prime time, and also taking advantage of increasing your ARPU, or your revenue per customer in this case. So yeah, I think it's just one of those big things that it's a huge confidence gap that you have to get over. And this is why I always suggest start small, and raising prices might be small for you, or maybe try doing some discounting, optimization, or maybe trying to do some, adjustment of your packaging. Just start small so that you get the confidence to continue to kind of make pricing changes on a regular basis, as Swapnil and Thomas are doing, internally at some really big companies.
Super helpful. Thomas, we can hear you just fine. So would love to get your take on the raising prices question. And then also, as you start looking at making changes to prices as a follow-on, next question would be, what data are you looking at? And how are you leveraging that data to make changes to your pricing strategy?
Yeah, it is hang on, now I got an echo here for myself. Yeah, so it is a really important point, and I think there's a lot of data out there on just early stage companies not really asking for enough money, and I guess it's just one of those things, right? You're close to your product, all the things that you want to do with your product and how it could be better in a million different ways, and so you just naturally feel like it's not a complete product, so you can't really ask for that much. And it's like, no, you really gotta be courageous there. Now I would, again, and also when it gets to the data, there's a difference between being in sort of a B2C model or any kind of high volume e-commerce model where, you know, you get very direct feedback on your pricing, but it is in the form of people either just leaving your website or signing up. So it's very binary there, versus if you're in more of a B2B sort of, you know, high touch sales model, then you can always go in and just ask for a lot of money, and then you can negotiate your way to what the customer actually wants. So with that, let me answer the data question. There's sort of three sets of data that are relevant when you're setting your price or when you're looking to change price. It's customer willingness to pay, it's competitive prices, and it's cost. You need to have those three. The most important is customer willingness to pay. It's also the hardest one to get, of course. Like, what does that mean? And that's where you just have to be intelligent about that. If it's a high touch sales model, you find out what customers are willing to pay, but you only find out if you ask for more than they're willing to pay. You don't find out if you ask for less. And if it's the high volume, kind of low touch or no touch model, you have a lot of different techniques for essentially, you know, trialing and erroring your way to the right number. And you can do A/B tests, and you can do all kinds of other stuff. So there's a lot of techniques that the pricing people employ all the time to sort of figure out what works and you know, what works better than something else. So there's not, I think, one answer to how do you get the data, but customer willingness to pay, that's a concept you just need to keep in your head at all times, and say, how do I find out what that is, and how do I find out what it is for different segments.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Patrick, your ProfitWell is very prolific in terms of publishing things, and you've got a great framework for thinking about that. So as we think about leveraging data and thinking about willingness to pay, you know, if I'm an early stage founder, or, you know, even early in my journey on pricing and packaging, where do you start? I think that's one of the questions we hear the most, is like, where do you start to get that data, get that understanding of willingness to pay?
Yeah, I think the basic idea is, and this is a controversial thing that you've heard many, many times, no matter the talks you've been to, you do have to start with like customer research and customer development, right? And there's been a lot that's been written on this, and I think that it's just one of those things, like very similar to pricing. It's like, it seems too like measure twice, cut once, right? And in the early stages, and just in terms of, you know, building a company, you're always like, what is the path of least resistance to get results? And taking a step back and thinking about your pricing isn't that path of least resistance. And so what I like to think about when talking to earlier stage companies or people who are early in their pricing journey is like, what's the 80-20 that you're going to get out of kind of effort? And to me, that 80-20 comes down to probably like three, you know, kind of plans of attack. The first is around, you know, figuring out like how you charge. So in B2B, this could be like your value metric, right? Like Twilio has, you know, just all types of value metrics depending on the product, you know, on a per SMS call, per API call, these types of things. Rapid7, I'm not too familiar with their pricing, but I know they have different, you know, tiers, and they make it simple though, which is really cool. But this is the thing, even in kind of a consumer product, if you figure this out, you can kind of have everything else be unoptimized, and you'll still be okay, because it kind of bakes growth into how you make money, because as that consumption increases from your customer, or as that value that they're getting, end up paying you more, and they actually will churn less if you're a subscription product, because they're kind of paying for what they're getting. And so that's the biggest one, and it's going to take some effort, but that's what I would, you know, kind of agonize about. And then the second thing is like, who is your actual target customer? That's the big thing that I think that not enough people struggle with. And the reason they don't is because it is a struggle. It's never going to be 100%. There's always going to be that, you know, that really large company that comes in and turns out they really want the product, and you want to like do everything to change your roadmap to help them. And so really kind of scrutinize who you're going after, because that's going to kind of make the rest of, you know, kind of your funnel and all of your other practices really efficient. And then the last thing I would say is like, I actually wouldn't fixate on price point too much in the early stage. And what I mean by that is I would figure out, like, am I $100 product? Am I $1,000 product? Am I a $10,000 product? Like, figure it out on that level. But sometimes I see a lot of execs and founders doing this for the first time. Like, they're scrutinizing, like, are we $19 or are we $21? And that is just not going to be that useful until you have massive volume and you have a whole sales team and all these other things where, those little changes will actually make some sort of an effort, not only in your conversion, but also your revenue per customer. And so I think those are the places to start. And in terms of research, there's been a lot that's written on it. It's just one of those things that you have to go out and collect data, even if it's purely qualitatively, from those people who are actually buying. And then you're not going to listen to exactly what they're going to say. You're going to filter that through everything and then you're going to earn your paycheck and actually make that decision. But those are some of the things, like from an 80-20 perspective, that I would kind of scrutinize really early on in your pricing journey.
That's great. So, do you want to add anything there?
Sure. So I would second what Patrick and Thomas said. Like, obviously, you need to figure out like the competitive piece, the cost piece, and the willingness to pay piece. As Thomas mentioned, the willingness to pay is the most important piece, because if you're in subscription SaaS business and if you're in a tech business, the cost is like so low, your gross margins are so high. So using that model most of the times doesn't work. The willingness to pay is super important, but it's so difficult to get that doing a bunch of research really helps you. But I'll also want to add a couple more points. From a data perspective, you have to look at a customer's entire lifetime. So even other data points like what is your customer acquisition cost, what your churn is, what your upsell, cross-sell potential is, goes into building what your pricing is. Because there are different models in which you can be a little aggressive with pricing. But if you can expand a customer's lifetime by like maybe a couple of years to more than that, you bring that back in over a period of time. So apart from just pricing, if you can look at the holistic picture, not just pricing, but what the customer gets in value and what you can get from them, that's something that will really help you grow big time in terms of subscription revenue model.
Yeah, that's great. I started my career as an operator, and one of the things I did as a CFO was look at a contribution model per customer, and started to think about customer acquisition cost, the land cost, and then how we reduce friction over time to get upsell, and also made sure that the customer journey sort of, was able to have high returns and minimize friction points. And that's something I don't think a lot of people think a lot about. Thomas, would be interesting to get your take on sort of how you think about, as a follow on that customer journey and those friction points, and how to sort of minimize friction and increase velocity over time.
Yeah, it is important, as you say, and I think as far as things that you need to do early on, especially if you're in some sort of subscription model, but I would say even if you're not, even if you're in a sort of repurchase and an upsell and a cross-sell model, is not pricing, but it's twin sibling packaging, right? And packaging, usually packaging should sort of come before pricing, right? You have to ask yourself three questions fundamentally: how, what, how, and how much, right? The what is, what are you actually selling? And it's very, very important early on in your journey to put the right limits on what you're selling to the customer, because you're going to continue to innovate. You're going to continue to add on, whether it's new functionality or coverage for a new area of service, whatever it is, and you have to be able to go back and ask for more. You don't want to get stuck in just fixed contracts that just stay the same. You're not selling annuities, even if you are in a subscription model. Always leave yourself a path to asking for more money. So this sort of comes back to what I said early on. You're early on in your product development, and all the bugs, and all the gaps and all of that, and you have a roadmap. That's fine. That's great. Customers that are that they're betting on you. They're buying from a startup. They know they're buying from a startup, right? They're investing in your journey, but that doesn't mean you need to sell that entire journey up front, or it doesn't mean that you have to sell them all, your next 3-year roadmap and just price that in, right? So I think this is actually, as Patrick says, don't over focus on the price point itself. Absolutely, I agree with that. You do need to look at the value metric. That's very important. And you need to look at, what are you selling? What's the entitlement as it's laid out in the, in the license agreement, in the contract, whatever document it is that you're signing, whatever entitlement you're selling has to be limited. and you have to limit it somewhere where you can go beyond it later.
That's great. I have some two follow-up questions that are sort of related and actually thread with this idea of resistance. And a lot of the upfront resistance that customers get is you got to sell in the product. And so a lot of people are trying to get around that upfront resistance points with freemium or free trials. And we've got two questions really that are getting after the same point. So someone's asking, what are the barriers in a freemium model? And how do you decide what features go into the free versus paid? And then another question around disruptive pricing and additional questions around freemium. So I know, Patrick, you have many thoughts on this, freemium versus free trial. Let's talk about that in the context of these resistance points and lifetime value. And then we'll in a few minutes we'll actually break out and people can ask more questions in the breakout rooms. But let's get to this first.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind with freemium is it's a acquisition model. It's not a revenue model. And I think a lot of people, that's if you ask like, these hardcore pricing folks on the panel, they'll probably be like, no, it's part of your pricing, that type of thing. But, in actuality, it's more about acquisition. You have to think about freemium more like a premium ebook or some sort of offer that you're kind of expanding that top of the funnel with. And the reason I became more of a freemium zealot than previously was because if you look at what's happening in the market with essentially, customer acquisition costs up 70% over the past 6-7 years. And you look at, willingness to pay in aggregate, basically going down because expectations have just shifted. You start to realize, like, what are these ways that I can not only get leads, but I can hit them at the right time so that they can, convert, because so much a part of sales and conversion is timing, right? And if you kind of look at the calculus of these different, things happening in the market, like freemium is actually the smartest thing that you can do, because what you're doing is you're bringing that lead in, and depending on your model with freemium, and there's different types of freemium, you're basically getting the opportunity and earning the right to nurture that lead to the point that they're ready to convert. And so put another way, like, you're putting the onus of conversion on the customer, the prospect, rather than putting the onus of conversion on some artificial sales process or artificial timeline with something like free trial. And so from just a theoretical standpoint, it works really, really well. And then when you get into the numbers, customers who convert from freemium, their NPS scores are typically about double. Retention is typically about 20% better on an absolute basis. And in addition to that, their CAC is typically about 35% lower, mainly because they're coming in. And so to get a little practical here, and then I'll let shut up about this, because you can kind of tell I could probably talk for hours about it. A couple of different types of freemium. There's a faux free trial type freemium, and this is where you basically set a limit on how much they get in the freemium plan. So if I'm doing like, email testing or something like that, they get 100 email opens, and you want to set that 100 basically where your target customer is going to hit the limit in 14 to 21 days, right? This is why it's a faux free trial. And if they don't hit it, well, then it resets the next month, and you can actually, wait until they become a really good customer, 6 months later per se. The other type is forever free. So this is what we do with ProfitWell. We have this completely forever free product that basically you can use forever. And we have, Fortune 50 companies on it, not paying us, all the way down to Johnny and Jane startups, not paying us. And so it's one of those things where you do that when you're in a market where you need high brand authority and you need high nurturing authority in order to be successful. And then you sell, they're essentially add-ons or different products inside your suite. And so those are some ways to think about it, and how you pick what goes into it. Well, it's basically a question of how aggressive you're going to be. With faux free trial, you can be very aggressive because it's just based on some sort of metric. Forever free, you got to kind of struggle because you want to make the free plan worth enough that people are going to use it, but also limited enough that there's triggers to, the other paid products. And so it's definitely a big product problem, but I'll kind of get off the stage there now, because I might go into another layer here, and I don't want to take up too much time.
And folks, we're gonna let Swapnil and Thomas kind of follow on to this, but you can ask more questions in the small discussion groups, which we're going to break into after we just wrap this question. So, Swapnil, do you have any?
I would love to. I'd love to put the yellow warning sticker on freemium if I can, and I mean it in that way. Like it is an incredibly powerful strategy, and it is something that you know, under the right conditions you really should look at it. But it is sort of a, you know, it's as Patrick says, it's an acquisition strategy. You can also think of it as freemium is certainly not a pricing strategy, but it is a packaging strategy, right? You are deciding that there is this value that you're going to give away, and you're not going to be able to get that back. Now, not all freemium models are this sort of free forever low tier of usage, but that's typically how we think about it, right? Whereas free trial, you may give more away, but you give it away for 60 days, or you give it away for 100 transactions, or you give it away for some you know, fairly determinate period of time or usage. So I would sort of, we're not going to do a poll here, but I would love to ask how many people here were using Evernote 5 years ago, and how many people are using Evernote today. And you know, if there are attendees here who might have worked for them, so I don't want to throw them under the bus too much, but it's a classic example of how not to do freemium, right? Look at the market share they got on their free service, and then they realized later, you know, oh crap, we gave too much away. And then they tried to peel it back, and it said, okay, only 2 devices, and then everybody just kind of fled, and now Google Keep has all of their old customers, right? So you have to be very, very, very careful. I definitely encourage everybody to explore it, but be very deliberate about how you use freemium. And free trial is something you can use in the meantime, but free trial is more of a sales strategy, and freemium is more of a packaging strategy, or, you know, maybe call it a marketing strategy if you want. So I'd put that yellow sticker on there if that helps.
Yeah, it's a scalpel, it's not a sledgehammer. That's what I always like to say about it.
I love the yellow sticker.
Yeah.
Swapnil, let you close us out here before we go into the discussion. We can keep talking about this in the smaller groups, but we'd love to hear your take on this as well.
No, I'll try to summarize like what Patrick and Thomas was saying. Like in my past life, I've tried actually both. I've tried freemium as well as free trial. Both have their pros and cons. Like if you're taking, like, again, that operator mindset, like if you can keep the freemium costs fairly low, it's a great tactic. Like you can build a brand, you can learn from those customers as well about how customers are using it, and then create like tiers and how you want to create those guardrails around. This is what happens when you need to move to a paying model. Free trial, because it's time-based, you get the full experience. That is what entices customers to actually either decide to go with the product or not. So again, I'm a fan of both. Again, I don't know which one I will lean towards, but again, I'll leave it at that.
We should have started with this. We could have a good fight about this one.
Well, you can go. So now
we all fight on like the margins where we're all saying the same thing, but it's like one of those classic topics. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So we can go. We can take this into the breakout room. So